In this video I'm going to talk about General Sir John McColl's visit to Israel. General McColl has served for 38 years in the British Army. He's been through combat in places like Northern Ireland, Iraq, Afghanistan and the Balkans. But last week he took a trip to Israel with a team of military experts from 6 NATO countries. What he found there completely shifted his understanding of the conflict between Israel and Hamas, and is something I believe we should all pay attention to. General McColl says he went to Israel with a view based on UK media reports from the conflict, and he left with a completely different perspective. General McColl, just like many people in the UK and the West, arrived in Israel sceptical of the conduct of the Israeli Defence Forces or the IDF in terms of are they really trying to maximise civilian casualties or are they trying to save casualties. General McColl, just like many people in the UK and the West, arrived in Israel sceptical of the conduct of the Israeli Defence Forces or the IDF. As I said, his initial views were shaped largely by the mainstream media, and it was that Israel's military operations were reckless and that they were causing unnecessary civilian casualties. He'd heard the criticism, accusations that Israel was using excessive force and that the humanitarian situation in Gaza was dire because of it. But after spending time on the ground and seeing the situation firsthand, McColl's viewpoint completely changed. And here's the important part. His shift wasn't due to blind support for Israel, it was because he saw the complexity of the situation and the balance that was missing in much of the UK media and Western media's coverage. Let's just hear part of his interview with the Times where he talks about the horrific brutality of Hamas on October the 7th. I will leave a link to the full interview in the comments and the description.
We saw video footage taken from the head cams of Hamas fighters, terrorists, and saw them chopping people's heads off with knives and hose. We saw them shooting women, children, and then singing about it afterwards. So the sheer brutality of it was shocking, and a reminder, as I put in the article I wrote, a reminder of the barrier that exists in between where we are now and any resolution. And that was really a reminder that Israel can't let that threat stand on their borders. No nation could. And Hamas have said that they would wish to do it again if they possibly could. So that was the first thing, a reminder of just how savage the attacks were.
So knowing that Hamas is an existential threat against Israel and that they must do something to protect their citizens, what did General McColl see as to what the IDF were up against? Well, one thing that shocked General McColl was the sheer scale of the tunnels that Hamas had dug under Gaza. 125 miles of tunnels, with estimates that there could be up to 310 miles of them in total. These tunnels go through homes, schools, hospitals, even mosques, where civilians are supposed to be safe, and yet Hamas haven't built a single shelter for their citizens. And those tunnels are used by Hamas terrorists to move around and launch attacks. They aren't just hiding, they're using civilians as shields, forcing them to remain in harm's way while they carry out their operations. This is the reality Israeli soldiers are up against, and it's hard to imagine, unless you see it yourself, how dangerous it is to carry out military operations in a situation like that. Imagine trying to fight an enemy that's hiding under your feet in places where there's no clear distinction between combatants and non-combatants. In fact, the only time you see Hamas dressed as combatants is when they come out of hiding to release the hostages. Well, the ones that they didn't kill, that is. One of the most eye-opening things General Sir John McColl discovered was the IDF's commitment to minimising civilian casualties. He had been sceptical at first, as I said, but after spending time on the ground, it became clear that the rules of engagement the IDF operates under are as rigorous, if not more so, than those of NATO forces. They're not just throwing bombs around recklessly, they're calling ahead, sending text messages and even dropping leaflets to warn civilians to evacuate before strikes take place. They use non-lethal munitions to knock on the roofs of buildings before they target them. This is all part of a strategy to save lives, even when fighting a ruthless enemy that's using civilians as shields and is hell-bent on destroying you. And sure, mistakes happen in war. There will be civilian casualties in a war. That's inevitable. That's why we try to avoid war. That's why we try to end wars. But here's the key difference. The IDF actively investigates those mistakes, ensuring accountability. In fact, many military operations are aborted because the IDF can't verify whether civilians are clear from danger. This isn't something you hear often in the media, but it's a crucial part of the story that needs to be told. Another critical point that McColl made was about the aid flowing into Gaza. What you don't often hear is that the IDF is working hard to get the aid in. 1,500 trucks a week are delivering food, medical supplies and basic necessities into Gaza. But this is what you don't hear in the UK media. Some of those trucks are intercepted by Hamas militants before they can reach the people who need them most. There are drone videos showing Hamas taking those supplies at gunpoint. This isn't a situation where aid isn't flowing. It is flowing. It's a situation where Hamas is actively obstructing it. Again, this is not the full story you often hear in the UK media, is it? So why am I sharing this? General McColl's story is a reminder that we need to take a step back and look at the full picture. Israel is fighting a brutal, complex war in a dense urban environment. It's fighting an enemy which is prepared to kill its citizens, young and old, decapitate them, kill the children in front of their parents, and vice versa, and untold crimes. The IDF are dealing with a ruthless enemy that hides behind their own civilians. They use hospitals and schools as shields and target civilians with suicide bombers. The IDF isn't perfect, but they're working within an incredibly difficult operational environment, doing everything they can to minimise civilian casualties while trying to root out Hamas. McColl's trip showed him that IDF's operations are far more measured and responsible than the media often portrays. And this isn't just about taking Israel's side blindly. It honestly isn't. It's about recognising the complexity of the situation, understanding that Hamas is not some cuddly resistance group. It's a brutal terrorist organisation, very brutal. And yet, in the UK universities and intellectual circles and amongst the activist class, Hamas are portrayed as some sort of resistance group, some sort of liberation group. They really aren't. They're not. They're even cruel to their own citizens. So it's not. A liberation movement can't be cruel to its own citizens. A liberation movement doesn't rape women. A liberation movement doesn't kidnap babies. The soldiers of the IDF are fighting in conditions that most of us could never imagine, with one hand tied behind their backs by the need to protect innocent lives, and on the other hand, having to eradicate this enemy which wants to destroy them. Let's face it, if we were facing an existential threat here in the UK with a terrorist group like Hamas, we would want our government to protect us like the Israelis are protecting their citizens. I think we all owe it to ourselves to take a deeper look at the situation in Israel and Gaza. Let's stop taking things at face value that the media shows and start asking the hard questions. What is the full story? Who's actually causing the most suffering? Who's doing everything they can to prevent it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the media is giving us the full picture of what is going on? And what do you think we should do about it? Thanks for watching, and please subscribe. It won't cost you anything. All you have to do is press the subscribe button. Thank you.